In your book, Pure Human, you write about the untapped potential within each of us. And what is one surprising aspect of our potential that people actually tend to overlook?
What scientists now know is the average human body, whatever average is, has about 50 trillion cells in the body. Every one of those cells we now know has a tiny electrical potential, 0.07 volts of electrical potential. And admittedly, that's a very small potential, but you do the math. 50 trillion cells times 0.07 volts, it's 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential that we have in the human body.
3.5 trillion
Volts of electrical potential, not realized, but it is potential. What would it mean if we could realize that? If we could focus that potential on the healing of our organs and tissues, or on accessing states of deep intuition, or deep states of cognition, super memory, super learning, super immune system, longevity response in the bodies.
Welcome to the newest episode of the Bridging Podcast. It's your host, Özlem Özkan, a podcast where you can learn, practice, and transform in any area of your life if you do the work. And today we have the honor of welcoming to the podcast a true pioneer in bridging science, spirituality, and human potential. Today, Gregg Braden is here. Gregg, welcome.
Özlem, it is so good to be with you. This is the first time in the new year. We have an unscripted conversation. I am happy to follow your lead and in this dance, and we'll see where this goes. I am coming to you today from our studio just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I just want to say how excited I am to have this conversation. Thank you.
So am I. Thank you. So Gregg is a 5-time New York Times bestselling author, visionary scientist, a thought leader, and his groundbreaking work has transformed the way we understand ourselves and our place in the universe. And now in his newest book, just launched the end of January, Pure Human, Gregg takes us on a journey into the essence of humanity at a pivotal time in history. He reveals how we can unlock extraordinary abilities within us, abilities that some believe only machines can achieve, and how these powers can help us navigate in an ever-changing world with clarity, purpose, and connection. So we'll be talking about Pure Human. And my first question is, who is this book for? What is it for? And what are you trying to change with Pure Human?
Oh, that's 3 questions you just asked.
In one, indeed. Who is it for? What is it for? What are you trying to change?
Thank you for the questions. This book, I wrote this book a little differently than I have written my books in the past. I actually took 7 months away from touring with just a couple of exceptions, commitments that I already had. I typically write the books in the airports, on the airplanes, and the hotels. And this one, Özlem, I felt was so important to say very, very clearly what I wanted to say, to be accurate, to be precise, honest, truthful, factual, lots of data. So I took 7 months at home to write this book. The title of the book is Pure Human. Excuse me, the hidden truth of our divinity, power, and destiny. The book has two themes, 2 primary themes. One is, as you mentioned, there is a concerted effort in the world by the nations of the world right now to replace our natural humanness, our natural biology, with artificial technology, computer chips in the brain, AI, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin, nanosensors moving through our circulatory system. And I wanted to bring that to the attention of our community because of the ways the marketing technology that's being used to introduce this is not making it clear the very high price that we pay as humans to accept these technologies into our bodies. So that is one theme. The other theme is the new science, the new discoveries, Oslam, that are showing us that in many cases, our own natural biology, our own natural systems meet and even exceed the capacities of the technology that we're being asked to replace our bodies with. We do it, except we do it better. So my goal, as I wrote this book, my goal at the very least, I hope that the reader walks away with a deeper appreciation for what it means to be human in a time when our humanness is being denigrated in the media, and our young people in schools are being taught that we are a flawed, FLAWED, a flawed species.
Mhm.
Uh, and among our flaws are things like emotion, because emotion can cloud our logic and our ability to think clearly sometimes. That's viewed as a flaw. So in a time when our humanness is being denigrated, I want young people especially to have a deeper appreciation and maybe even a step further, maybe even a sense of pride for what it means to be human. Uh, and those were the two principal themes that we see come together in the book. You know, the best minds of our time are telling us that we're on a very dangerous trajectory with technology right now. And that unless we change the way we think about ourselves and our relationship to the technology, within a very few short years, they're saying very probably that you and I, this generation, that we are the last generation of what are called pure humans, that the world, and if humans only live on Earth, the universe, we're the last generation of pure humans that the universe will ever know. Because by the year 2030, the policies are already being written, the laws are already being enacted, the marketing is already underway, enticing us, coercing us, indoctrinating us, and in some cases, mandating that we accept external technology into our bodies. And they say by the year 2030, when you speak to someone at the market or at the airport or on the street, you will be speaking to some form of human machine hybrid to some degree, maybe to a lesser degree, maybe to a greater degree. Many nations are already mandating RFID identification chips into the bodies
Mhm.
of people, some newborns, for example. Um, so that's one end of the spectrum. And the other end is that in the United States, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has now approved the use of computer chips in the human brain that allow the brain to communicate with the operating system of a computer with no wires, no keyboard. It's all driven by the interface between the brain and the processor in the brain. So I think it's a very timely book, and you know I think for about four generations we have been prepared to accept this technology into our bodies. We have been taught, our young people especially, are being taught that we are a flawed form of life, and that means that we are victims. And as victims, we need something outside of ourselves to be the best version of ourselves and to compete in the world. That means we need a savior. And in this day and age, the savior is being touted as technology. We're being told that we need technology in our bodies to be the best version of ourselves. So that was my long answer to your three questions.
Yeah.
And I hope that helps to give a sense for why I've written this book.
Yeah, definitely it does. And you know, in terms of deep having deep appreciation of being a human, in your book Pure Human, you write about the untapped potential within each of us. And what is one surprising aspect of our potential that people actually tend to overlook?
Well, I'm happy to answer that, but I'm going to take about a half a step back that will lay the foundation to maybe for a better answer. When I was in school back in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and even young people in school today, uh, we learn about our bodies through biology textbooks. And biology looks at us as soft, wet, mushy, sticky, gooey stuff, in a physical body. All that began to change about 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, scientists began looking at biology not from uh, a, a cell perspective per se, but they began looking at us from an IT perspective, information technology. That changes everything. It's a very, very different way of thinking. So let me give some examples, and then from that I can roll into to answer your question. What scientists now know is the average human body, whatever average is, has about 50 trillion cells in the body.
Mhm.
Every one of those cells we now know has a tiny electrical potential, 0.07 volts of electrical potential. And, admittedly, that's a very small potential, but you do the math 50 trillion cells times 0.07 volts. And I'll do the math for you because I just did it on another interview. It's 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential that we have in the human body. What would it
3.5 trillion.
trillion volts of electrical potential, not realized, but it is potential. What would it mean if we could realize that? If we could focus that potential on the healing of our organs and tissues, or on accessing states of deep intuition, or deep states of cognition, super memory, super learning, uh, uh, super immune system, longevity response in the bodies. But it doesn't stop there because every one of those 50 trillion cells also functions the way that electrical equipment functions. We have in our cells the equivalent of circuits that have an input and an output. We have as our cells the equivalent of transistors and resistors and capacitors. Every cell in our body receives photons of light, particles of light, and we transmit photons of light. Well, light is information. So we are communicating with one another. You and I are communicating with one another, even though we're a half of a planet apart, through these fields of information. The DNA, I mean, I could go on and on with this, but it's fascinating. The DNA in our bodies, every successful genetic transaction in our species, for the whole species, is recorded in each of our individual bodies, in our individual genome. And the way that DNA stores information, this is really interesting. It's transparent because you can read it. It's not hidden if you know how to read the DNA. It's
Mhm.
transparent. It is secure and it is immutable. That means once it's in the genome, it's there because we are a distributed system of life. And if those characteristics sound familiar, they are precisely the principles that blockchain technology is based upon, the technology that is changing the decentralized finances of the world, the way that economies are working. It's the future of our economies. The external economy of blockchain actually mimics, it copies what we do in our bodies, except we do it better. There was
Wow.
a, you know, there was a. I'm hesitating because I don't know how deep I want to go into this, but because scientists are looking at the human body from an IT perspective, they're making discoveries. They just don't publish those in a traditional biology textbook. They publish the results of the studies in these obscure technical journals like IEEE, the engineering journals, that, relatively few people are reading these. So the discoveries aren't hidden, Muslim. It's just that they are not shared in the mainstream in the way that we would associate with biology and life. So let me just give a couple of examples. When we look at a human neuron, for example, and we say, how does that compare to a computer chip? When I'm in a live audience with young people are taught to worship the computer chip and AI. They think that's it.
Mhm.
So we look at a computer chip. Is it fast? Absolutely, it's fast. Is it efficient? Absolutely, it's efficient. Here's the key: is it scalable? How far can you scale the capacity of a computer chip? Well, the answer is it will always be limited by the physics of the stuff it's made of. So a computer chip is made of silicon, and information can only move between those silicon atoms at a certain speed, and it'll never exceed that speed. So what we say is that the computer chip, it's fast, it's efficient, but its scalability is finite. It has an endpoint that it cannot exceed. Now, what about a human neuron? It's fast, it's efficient. Is it scalable? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because every time scientists push the human neurons to the edge of what they think is its capability, to the boundary, to the limit, the neurons do what humans do. They morph and they adapt to that new condition, and they open a whole new vista of potential. And they do that again and again and again and again. So the question is, are we scalable? How far can we scale the human neuron? And the answer is we don't know, because every time we push the limit, we adapt to that limit and open up new possibilities. So the idea of looking at the human body in terms of circuits and electrical potential and all of those things, uh, how do we access that's a technology. It literally is a technology. It's not a primitive technology like a computer chip and a physical wire. It's more than
Mhm.
that. It's a cell membrane and DNA in neurons. So how do we access that technology? Well, years ago, back in the Cold War years, I worked I was a senior computer systems designer in
Mhm.
during the Cold War years, and I had access to some of the most advanced technology in the Cold War. That advanced laser systems, communication systems, radar, all those things. And one of the things I learned, Oslam, it is fascinating, is that the more complex a system is behind the scenes, the simpler the user interface. For example, I've got a smartphone right here. I
Mhm.
can push with my finger, one finger, I push a picture on my smartphone, and I can communicate with my friends, I can pay my bills, I can do my banking just by pushing those icons on the screen. That's a very simple user interface for an advanced technology. We work the same way. We are so advanced behind the scenes that we have a very simple user interface. Our interface is thought, feeling, emotion, breath, focus, movement, and nutrition. And I know you've had as a guest on this program my dear spiritual brother, friend, for over 30 years, Dr. Bruce Lipton.
Yeah.
And he and I tour and do presentations together. Often, he is essentially the father of epigenetics. He was doing epigenetics in the 1967, before anybody even knew what it was. Everything that I just said is the user interface is an epigenetic trigger. These are all epigenetic triggers: thought, feeling, emotion, belief, breath, focus, nutrition, movement. This is how we access this extraordinary potential in our bodies. And here's the catch: if we substitute external technology and replace our brain cells with computer chips or our immune system with chemicals in the body, what happens is our natural abilities begin to atrophy. They begin to stop working and we lose them as
Yeah.
individuals. Eventually, we lose them as a species. So, this is why I love technology outside of the body. But the book is advocating for our humanness, developing the potentials that we're only beginning to understand right now. We are on the precipice. Within the next 5 years, the decisions will be made, the policies will be written, the laws will be enacted. We're on the precipice of giving away our very humanness, Oslam, before we even know fully what it means to be human. And I am advocating for our species. I'm advocating for our humans. I believe that we are rare, precious, sacred, and worth preserving. And that's the message in the book. So
Yeah.
I know I covered a lot of ground and I wanted to say
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
you
now,
covered a lot. You covered a lot of questions that I also wrote down
okay,
here, but it's great.
okay. Well, now we
It-
can tie into all of that information and
yeah.
we can have a conversation.
Yeah. So actually, you talked about actually that some information is not shared in the biology books. It's shared in some other books that some few niche people maybe read,
Exactly.
and also about the scalability and adaptability of the human. And I want to ask a question actually about that. So in Pure Human, you highlight that human cells are specialized. Neurons outperform AI in adaptability, scalability, and performance. So now someone that is listening to that and to this information, gets this information. So how can this person, or how can we all embrace and cultivate these biological advantages in a world increasingly reliant on technology? In
Mm.
5 years, 2030, it will be all different. How can we prevent that? How can
So
we cultivate?
Um, I appreciate that question, and so now I'm going to use a word, and I'll define the word, and then we'll use it. Everything that we're talking about, Oslam, are facets of what are called human divinity. Now, that
Mhm.
word comes with some baggage for some people. It means different things to different people. So let me define the word. The contemporary definition of divinity. You look it up. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. That's all it is. Transcend means to become more than. Perceived means that you and I and our friends, we may be living limitations that are not real, that we have accepted from the programs of our parents, our family, our culture, our society, obsolete science in the textbooks, religious traditions that limit our perceptions. So our divinity is the ability to become the best version of ourselves. Examples of divinity: imagination, creativity, innovation, empathy, sympathy, compassion. The ability to heal our bodies begins with divinity. It begins because the definition to transcend perceived limitations. Our healing is us transcending some limit that has been programmed. So when we talk about utilizing these things, divinity is us living the best version of ourselves, is us living the full potential of what it means to be human. And we're only beginning to understand what that means. So I would encourage people to do just that, to explore the power of their own innate abilities to heal. Emotional healing is a perfect example. We all have experienced trauma in our lives.
Mhm.
We live in a world of trauma. They say perhaps the first trauma we all experience is the trauma of birth, of coming from a warm, saline based environment, being pushed into a dry air environment where we have to breathe air with our lungs. When we're in our mother's womb, our lungs are filled with liquid, and we are pulling the oxygen out of that liquid. And in a moment, we're pushed into this world. That's a trauma right there. We all have lived through the trauma of a global pandemic, and it affected all of us differently. Some of us lost friends, family, and loved ones. But even if we didn't lose friends, family, and loved ones, we all lost a way of life. We all lost freedoms. We all lost the way that our communities work. Some stores never came back. Some, the little mom and pop local stores became the big conglomerate stores. We all lost something. So to heal begins with the way we think of ourselves and our relationship to our bodies. We have to know that we have the ability to heal. That is an expression of divinity.
Yeah.
So all the things we're talking about, and this isn't about religion, it is about the deep truth of human potential. There is a movement on the planet right now it was formulated through the World Economic Forum, the WEF. They meet in Davos every year. They have now partnered with the United Nations and implementing what are called 17 Sustainable Development Goals, UN SDG 2030. They want to implement these by the year 2030. When you look at these goals on the website, they are beautiful goals that all of us want. Goals like food security, goals like the end of poverty, goals like global health, all those. Who doesn't want that? Now, you read the fine print that very few people take the time to read. How are they going to accomplish those goals? They're going to accomplish those goals by using AI and merging technology into the human body in ways that, in my opinion, are not good for us. I believe we can achieve those goals without giving our humanness away. But these goals, we're all going to be pressured, indoctrinated, coerced in these next 5 years to accept the technology into our bodies. And I want my global family, my community, to know that they have a choice, and that in many instances, we are better than that technology. So, and you just mentioned one. Let me just, there was a study that was done, it was done almost 10 years ago where, excuse me, where the human brain was compared to a microprocessor. And the way they made that equivalent, they said that the synapses in the human brain, so the place, we've all seen the pictures of neurons communicating with neurons, and there's a little spark that jumps between the end of the cells. That gap is called the synapse. So they equated the number of synapses in the human brain with the number of transistors on a microprocessor. And interestingly, in the most advanced microprocessors that we have today, that number is very much the same. It's very close. We have about the same number of synapses that there are on a microprocessor. So to make a long experiment very brief, I'll summarize what they found is that the human brain is 100-fold more efficient than the 6 gigahertz computer chips that they were working with at that time.
Wow.
It doesn't mean that they're not fast and efficient. The question is, and this really all comes down to love, and I think this is really what you're asking. The question is, do we love ourselves enough to accept the gift of our humanness and what it means to be human in the world, and to explore and adapt that into our lives? Or are we going to give our humanness away to the speed and the efficiency of computer chips and artificial intelligence? And we have to make that decision. I'm not talking like 50 years in the future. This is happening so quickly. And most people don't even know it. Most people, if I go to my local market, my neighbors They don't have time to talk about this. They're trying to put their kids through school. They're working 3 jobs. The price of eggs in America right now is $8 for 12 eggs, for a dozen eggs, because
Wow.
of what is happening. So they are not even having these conversations on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'll tell you, they know something's not right. They
Yes.
say the world's moving too fast, and their response is to slow down and go back to basics. So they're taking their kids out of public schools, for example, homeschooling, to teach them the values and the skills that those young people will need in life. And they're growing their own food, and they're learning how to heal their own bodies in ways that are traditional medicine, that are, you, before we went live, you were telling me about your family and your culture and your parents, these traditional ways of healing. So most people don't know how quickly this technology is being introduced, not into the world, but into our bodies. And that's where I'm pushing back on this book. I love tech in the world. There's, in my opinion, the technology for everyone in mass. It's not where we want to go as a species. There are always exceptions for individuals. So, for example, um, a man or a woman who comes back from the battlefield of Afghanistan or Iraq or halfway around the world, and they've lost arms or legs, if they can have a computer chip in the brain that communicates with an artificial leg or an arm, and now they get to hold their babies in their arms, and they get to feed themselves and wash their own hair, that's a beautiful thing. Individual cases, but not to mandate that every newborn has a computer chip in the brain. And this is the kind of thing that we're moving toward right now. So to answer your question, what we do is we explore how to become the best version of ourselves, and that's different for everyone. So for those individuals who uh, are stuck in the trauma of childhood abuse, for example, um, then their path is to find the natural abilities to release that trauma. And we have courses where we do that. We have 4-day courses. Every emotion that we have ever had in our lives, from the greatest joys to the deepest sorrows and the hurt and the ecstasy, they create a chemical in the body that is the equivalent of that emotion. And that chemical is called a neuropeptide. And when we create those chemicals, typically they will pass through the body, that we metabolize, and those chemicals will be released in body fluids and digestion and things like that. However, if you're 2 years old or 3 years old and you have a trauma, a childhood trauma, you don't have the tools at that age to heal that trauma. So those chemicals, those emotions become stuck in the body. And they literally are, the chemicals, those neuropeptides cannot metabolize. So what they do is they attach to the organs and the glands and the tissues that in our minds we associate with the trauma. And they will stay there for a year, they'll stay there for 70 years. And until we have the ability to resolve the trauma and allow those neuropeptides to flow. So this is one example. How do you do that? There are a lot of techniques. Breath work. Breath work is a powerful emotional lubricant that frees those neuropeptides and allows them to flow through the body. And if you've ever done the breath work, we offer this in our 4-day programs. And people describe what happens is their mouth begins to taste like metal, because
Yes.
the minerals in those neuropeptides are now moving in saliva, or their urine will smell funny. They go after they go on a break and they pee, and it smells different because these are chemicals being released. perspiration, tears. These are all ways that we free these neuropeptides. So that's one example. If someone is exploring how to heal their personal trauma, if someone is dealing with health issues and they have given away their power to heal to a medical system that doesn't really focus on the healing, it focuses on covering the symptoms. And that can be useful. If you are in pain and you can cover the symptom of the pain temporarily so
Mhm.
that you have the ability to focus on your healing, that can be a good thing. But if you just use the chemicals to cover the pain and you never focus on the healing, we know that's not a good thing. So when you say how do we develop these? It's different for everyone. It depends on what we're learning in our lives, whether it's emotional healing, psychological healing, physical healing, whether it is nurturing through families and relationships. Maybe it's about trust. Maybe it's about fear. It's different for everyone. The point is that all of that healing is an expression of our divinity, and that we all have everything we need to facilitate that healing. It begins with the way we think of ourselves. We have
Yeah.
to think that we are, first of all, that we are worthy of healing. And this is a big one
Yeah.
because our species and our religions and our cultures and even our families have been conditioned to believe that we sometimes are not worthy of love, that we're not worthy of the healings. And if you don't think it's possible, it may not be possible in those instances. But these are all expressions of human divinity. And all we talk about this in the book.
Yeah. That's why actually also what Dr. Bruce Lipton tells in many interviews and in his books, that the last stage of pregnancy until from time until the age of 7, around 7, is so important because the child is at that moment recording and uploading everything what she gets, and after 7, 8 years old it is downloading the program. So if you as
Yeah,
a parent or a teacher or any surrounding, if you say things or model things that limit the child will take that for his or her whole life. So
yeah.
you want to say something?
Well, no, that's absolutely correct. It's called the hypnagogic state of consciousness. It is an altered state that we're in the womb. We're picking up signals from our mother and from our environment, even in the womb, up until the age of 7. We are downloading. We're taking in the patterns of our caregivers, the way our parents treat other people. We begin to record that as the way that how do they deal with people they like? How do they deal with people they don't like? How do they deal with conflict? That all comes at that very early age. And then right around the age of 7 or 8, as our brain begins to develop and we go into, or continues to develop, and we go into different states of consciousness, what we learned in those 7 years becomes the mode, the pattern that we use to operate. It can be changed if it's not healthy. And we have to be aware that there is a pattern. We have to be aware that it can be changed. And we call that the workshop of life.
Mhm.
And we all
Yeah.
have that. We all have that to some degree.
So, actually, in your book, you are writing about 60 pure human truths. And one of them, number 10, is awakening your divinity begins with the way you think of yourself, your story. That's what you just actually
Yeah.
explained. Pure human truth, number 10. So, I actually want to go to this is like something I'm also struggling with sometimes, and I know a lot of people around me. uh, I'm lucky that I have some very aware friends around me and people that I work with, but this is sometimes the struggle. like knowingly and sometimes on a subconscious level, we'll create situations of adversity in our lives to hide the truth of our own sacred power from
Sure.
ourselves. We'll create difficult relationships, financial problems, health crises, career failures, and even life threatening situations to occupy actually our awareness. Um, and distract us from revealing the game changing secret that we each harbor within our existence. This is what you write in the book. Why do we actually create adversity in our lives knowingly or subconsciously to distract ourselves from really uncovering the transformative power and sacred truth we all hold within us? Like,
That's a
really, this self sabotage.
that's a big question. First, I want to ask: do you have the actual book, the physical book, right there, the hardback book, or did they send
No,
you?
no, I got the press kit.
Ah,
I
okay,
don't have the I have the PDF book.
okay, all right. Well, thank you for reading that part of the book. So this all come the answer. It all comes back to divinity. Our divinity. First of all, we all have divinity. You cannot lose your divinity. However, we there are three conditions that will deny our divinity. First of all, we can personally deny. We are beings of free will. So we can choose to deny the power of our divinity. Divinity is what frees us from fear. Divinity is what frees us from hate. Divinity is where we find our power in this world. Everyone has the choice to deny that power. And if you deny that power, then you blame the world outside of you for your bad experience. You blame other people. You blame circumstances, situations. You blame your past. You blame your family. You blame everyone rather than take personal responsibility. So that's one way to lose access to divinity. We can deny our own divinity, number one. Number two, our divinity can be conditioned away from us through friends, family, community, society, religion, science, false science, all of those things. If we give our power away to the ideas of other people, and those ideas tell us that we are powerless victims in the world and that we need something outside of ourselves, that we're not enough, that we're not worthy of the power of human divinity, then we also lose access to our divinity. The third way that we lose our divinity is through technology. When we begin to replace our natural biology with synthetics, those synthetics cannot access the the field of information that we call human divinity. The synthetic all this, the synthetic skin, chemicals in the blood, again, computer chips in the brain. Let me just give an example of this. You know, when I was, again, when I was a kid, when I was in school, we were taught that when we're born, we have a fixed number of brain cells. And throughout your life, the choices that you make, if you drink a beer, you lose brain cells. If you drink a glass of wine, you lose brain cells. Recreational drugs, you lose brain cells. Well, now we know that we are producing new brain cells up to the last breath that we take of life on this world. So that's not an excuse to drink beer and do drugs and all that, but I'm saying
Mhm.
we're constantly producing new brain cells, but there's a catch. And the catch is this: unless we engage our new brain cells in a meaningful way within about 7 days, within about a week, those cells believe that they're not needed, so they will die. That
Mm.
principle applies to the whole human body. It applies to the immune system. If we've got chemicals creating immune response for us, the body begins to shut down its immune response because it feels it's not needed. Reproductive system is the same thing. It works. Our biology is based on a principle called use it or lose it.
Yes.
And when we do not use our biology, the system believes it's not needed, and it begins to atrophy over time, and eventually you lose access to that. to whatever it was that system offered. So when it comes to divinity, three ways that we lose access to our divinity. We either deny our own personal divinity, it is conditioned out of us when beginning the time we're children. These are the programs that Bruce talks about, or technology can, replacing the human body, can veil our divinity. So those are three ways we can lose it. When you ask, why would we create situations, uh, the difficult situations, that typically is the result of our programming that says we are not worthy of this kind of power, of this kind of healing, of this kind of love, of this kind of abundance, of this kind of joy in our lives. That's the programming that we get early on, and we will implement that programming by creating or drawing into our lives situations and circumstances. We'll be attracted to jobs where we work for someone else who is not kind to us at all, a mean boss. And then we'll quit that job because we can't take it anymore, but we'll go to another job where the same thing happens. Or we will attract a partner into our lives who may be a wonderful partner in some aspects, and then there are other aspects where that partner will ignite all of the beliefs that we have about ourselves, that we're not worthy of love. If we're not worthy of love, we have a partner who will demonstrate that for us by not giving us
Yes.
love, by not being available. I love your podcast, and you've had other guests that talk about this in detail, so I don't have to go into a lot of detail. But what I will say is this: these ideas are not new. I In our 4-day courses, we look to 2,500-year-old texts, and in those 2,500-year-old texts, there are mirrors of relationships, 7 hierarchical, sequential mirrors of relationship that were identified 2,500 years ago. And even though we're in a modern world compared to that, the same principles play out in our lives. So the mirrors range from very simple mirrors that it's easy to see to very complex mirrors that sometimes it's not so easy to see. And we will draw people into our lives that echo the beliefs that we have, so that we can heal those beliefs, so that we can outgrow the false assumptions, so that we can accept our divinity, so that we can accept that we are worthy of love and of healing. And that's why we create those kinds of situations. I'm just hesitating here. We could go so deep into this, and I want to respect the time that we have, but it's all part of the same picture, and this is the key. We are biological beings in this world. We are not the product of an accident of biology a long time ago. We are the product of intentional actions. Our DNA, our genome, scientists now know this. The mutations that give us our humanness, those mutations did not happen by accident. They are complex mutations. They can't happen in nature. They appear to be intentional. They happened at the same time. They happened 200,000 years ago. When we first emerged, the first humans, called anatomically modern humans, we showed up. It's only 10,000 generations ago, 200,000 years. And with those mutations, we were given these extraordinary abilities that we call human divinity that no other form of life has. And everything that we're talking about is us awakening those divine potentials. And that covers everything as obvious as the healing of our bodies to as esoteric as telepathy and communicating with one another in other forms of life non-verbally, to deep states of intuition.
Hmm.
For example, in the book, I tell a story. There was a woman, a mother in Brisbane, Australia, whose son was on the battlefield in Afghanistan. And she woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and knew that he was in trouble. She called on the telephone. She called his commanding officer, who did not know what had happened. And the commanding officer said everything is fine until later in the day when her son reported back that their vehicle had been ambushed by a roadside bomb. Fortunately, he survived. But the question is, how did a mother in Brisbane, Australia, know that her son was in trouble before his own military unit knew that there had been a problem? The answer to that is that it is human intuition. And our intuition, we're now beginning to understand, is an expression of divinity. And
Mhm.
let me take, now that we're talking about this, I want to share a new research about
Please.
the way intuition works between a mother and her child. what studies now have shown is that when the fetus is in the womb of the mother, we know that her blood is circulating through the fetus, but the fetus's blood is circulating through the mother. That means, and what they found, is the baby's DNA is circulating in the mother's body, and the mother's
Mm.
DNA is circulating in the baby's body.
Yeah.
So even after the baby is born, part of the baby's DNA stays in the mother, and it concentrates in places like the liver, is one of the places where they found it. All right. So what does this mean? Well, we know that DNA, in those technical journals that we talked about earlier, DNA is literally a fractal antenna. What does that mean? Well, we know an antenna tunes to a signal. A fractal antenna means it tunes to many signals across a broad spectrum of information. So, what that means is that the mother's DNA is in communication with her child anywhere on the planet Earth, as long as the mother is alive and the child is alive. And that
Wow.
that's how a mother knows instinctively. We call it instinct or intuition, when a mother knows when her child is in trouble. That's also the reason I lost my mom during COVID, and I wasn't prepared for what that meant in my body. It literally physically hurt, and I couldn't understand why. And that's why I did the research to understand when the mother dies or when the baby dies, there's a break in the
Yeah.
communication. And we literally feel that. We feel it. And we say words like, a part of me is gone, or, something is missing, or, it, for me, I'll tell you what happened for me. I ended up in the hospital twice in the emergency room for chest pains, and there was nothing wrong with my heart. And the doctor ran all the tests in the emergency room, and he was very, very male,
Yeah.
very matter of fact. He came in and he said, "Mr. Braden, I don't know why you're here. There's nothing wrong with you. You're so healthy." Uh, he says, "It's in your mind," and he left. And then a nurse came in, a female nurse, and the first thing she said to me, she said, "Gregg, what's happening in your life?" And I told her, I said, I'm losing my mom. And she said, "You're dealing with unresolved grief." And
Mm.
that grief literally, it cramps the little muscles around the heart, unresolved grief. And I went to 2 sessions of grief counseling and resolved that grief, and then it never happened again. But that's how powerful the link between a mother and her children. It's not just emotional. It is emotional, but it's more than that. It is actually an energetic communication between the DNA. My DNA was in my mom's body, and her DNA was in my body. And we have that communication. All children do with their parents. They may not always acknowledge it. And when she finally left, when she died from COVID. And when she died from COVID, that link was broken. And that was the pain that I was feeling in my body. This is how finely tuned we are. And it's that link that allows deep states of telepathy and intuition. So rather than having the experience occasionally, spontaneously, these are skills that we can develop and learn to honor the feelings that we have and to communicate with not just with one another, but other forms of life. Humans and dolphins communicate through these telepathic and intuition, intuitive experiences. And now we know why. It's because the DNA is actually communicating. It is a fractal antenna. So these are very different ways of thinking, and it's very different than my upbringing. Very
Hmm.
different. I was trained as a scientist. This is very different from my original training. However, everything I'm saying is documented in peer reviewed scientific journals that simply aren't connected. So you've got a journal of electronics here, and a journal of biology, and a journal of psychology, but they're not talking. So we're only beginning to understand who we are. And I think for each individual, we have to choose for ourselves what aspect of ourselves uh, are we trying to develop? What is
Yeah.
life? What is the universe inviting us to develop? And the way we recognize that is, where is the hardship in our life? Because it's by developing the part of ourselves that we already have that we overcome the hardship. So if someone's dealing with a physical ailment, a disease, a condition of some kind, that can be the universe tapping us on the shoulder saying, hey, you've got everything you need to transcend perceived limitations. That's divinity.
Hmm.
Or if the universe is, if someone is dealing with bad relationships, you keep having relationship after relationship after relationship where the person betrays our trust or lies to us, for example, then we have to look and say, what is it about us that is drawing those kinds of relationships? And there's all kinds of books and programs and speakers that explore these, really, really well. So in that way, it all fits together. It's all part of the same story. It's us learning about our divinity and answering the question, do we love ourselves enough to accept the deep truth of what it means to be human?
So, Greg, you actually covered so many things and so many valuable things, and I believe we should actually learn when we are even younger, as a
Yeah.
child. I don't know if you know that, but I've been trained as an educator and pedagogue, and I've been teaching at different schools abroad and in the Netherlands. And these information is not covered in
No,
books.
no.
You know, depending of the teacher, we cover sometimes through project things, but why do you think some information is actually is it hidden, or why is it
You
not
know,
covered at
this,
schools? What is the reason for it, especially at schools, primary schools, when the
yeah.
children are 4, 5, 6, we let them play and then we start giving them books where they do maths, reading and all these things, or now AI more actually with their iPads they start working on all these things. Why not these
You know, this question,
information?
this question should be the first question of our next episode.
Oh yeah, I
That
think so.
because it could be. The answer to the question is that okay, it has not always been this way. We happen, and when I say we in a modern Western society, because there are some societies that are the exception and that do teach these things and do empower their children more in indigenous and traditional societies. In the modern Western model, the goal is not to empower the individual. We live in a time where authoritarianism is gaining momentum, centralization of power and control. And when we accept our divinity, it frees us from fear. When we don't have that, when we are in fear, we are more susceptible and more vulnerable to the ideas and the agendas of other people. So there are big agendas in the world driving us toward a centralized world, one world government, one world currency, one world, we all see this happening to different degrees. When we are empowered, we push back against that. When we're in fear, we accept. We're more readily accepting of these things. The goal of the education is not to empower us uh, at the present time. And I want to thank you for the work you do, because you are the generation that's changing that. And there are new teachers and new systems that are changing. We live at a time, there's two parallel worlds. They're happening at the same time. There's one world where everyone is all in on accepting all the rules, all the technology. And then there's another world where people are looking more within for their own power, their own empowerment, personal responsibility. I come from a generation where many people allow themselves to be defined by the bad experiences of their past. In other words, if they had a bad family, or they had a bad father, or they, were in the war or whatever, they allow those experiences to make them who they are for the rest of their lives. What divinity says to us is it is a choice to be
Yeah.
defined by our past. We have our past, you can't change that, but we get to choose who we become in the presence of those experiences. I get to choose what kind of man I want to be today and in the future. And it is not defined. I'm the product of a dysfunctional, abusive, alcoholic family. My father was the
Hmm.
abuser. And I have a younger brother, 4 years younger. And we're like night and day. We don't
Yeah.
look alike, we don't think alike, but we both come from the same family. My brother believes that his past has defined him.
Hmm.
And so all of his jobs and his failed relationships, he blames on those experiences. And it's easy to do that. And I was very fortunate at a young age. I had what I call a very strong soul compass. Uh, I, I did not succumb to the peer pressure. I didn't care what other people thought uh, when they wanted me to, to do the drugs or to do, whatever. And so my past is my past, but I recognize that I get to choose the life
Yeah.
that's in front of me. And I'm still learning. I'm a student. I'll learn to the last breath that I take with those new neurons. I'll be learning. But it's a very different way of thinking to know that you have the power to chart your destiny forward. That's very different than saying I am the product of everything in my past. And
Yes.
that is a powerful expression of divinity, because the divinity frees us from the fear that empowers us to go forward without knowing what the future holds. You don't know what the answer is, but you know that you have everything you need to move forward. That's a very, very different way of thinking. These are all expressions of divinity, pure human. I talk about these in the book. And I just want to say that social media is a very powerful part of the indoctrination, that
Yes.
we're all casualties. And in the book, in chapter 7, I identify some of the marketing techniques that are being used to lead us to make choices and decisions that are not good for us, but they support a bigger narrative and a greater agenda. I identify what those are, and I also offer the remedy. How do you transcend those kinds of programming? Because we're all, if you're engaged in social media at all, we're all part of that, and myself included. So,
Hmm.
so the book, again, two parallel themes. There are people that want to change the world and change our bodies, and then the science is showing us that that we're not what we've been told, and we're so much more than we've been led to believe. And again, it all comes down to our love. Do we love ourselves
Yeah.
enough to accept the truth of who we are and live that truth in our lives?
Yeah. And at the end, eventually, we all decide to choose love or not. We decide, right? That's
I,
our decision, the free will.
I think so. I mentioned earlier, I think what we're seeing is the changes are happening so fast in one generation. We've never seen anything like this. Two parallel societies are emerging. So we said the one society, everybody's in on all the technology, computer chips in the body, RFID chips, all that. The other, where they're rejecting that, taking their kids out of school, growing their own food, that's not sustainable to have those two societies. I think what will happen, Ozone, is that we will do what humans do. We'll check each other out. We're gonna look around and we're gonna say, who's happier, who's healthier, whose lives are more fulfilled, whose children are better adjusted in the world. And the answer to that will lead us, I think we'll probably find a middle ground. I think we'll always have technology in our lives, but we'll allow the technology to serve us, not to enslave us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we will end up there. I think we're going to have a rocky road to get to that point. And that's why it's important to have these conversations so that our your community, my global family, to know that we have a choice. And that's why I so very much appreciate you. You have a beautiful platform. You're a powerful motivator. You are a magnet for community. You have built this virtual community, and we need community now more than anything. And most of all, I appreciate your trust in
Yeah.
me for allowing me to share these ideas on your platform. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's an honor to have you here, to have this conversation with you, and to make the audience listen, to all what you have to say. Your long work, it is a long ride. You have been working for years on this. So,
Yeah.
where can people find your book, Pure Human? Like for the people in Europe, especially?
It. So my publisher will publish in other languages. Right
Mhm,
now, it is available only in English.
mhm.
So it is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can go to our website and order the book. Uh, the the foreign editions we typically are in 42 different languages, and they will be. But right, it just came out a couple of weeks ago. So right now, and the audio version is available. I went to the studio and recorded with my own voice.
Wow.
The audio version, the audible version, the Kindle version, and then the
Mhm.
physical hardback. They are all available right now.
All right. And you were also mentioning a 4-day course.
Yeah,
Where can people find that?
I offer 2 times a year. It is a 4-day course that is called Pure Human Breakthrough. And you will see information in this book and much more that's not in the book. Plus, a very powerful, I bring in professional breathwork facilitators, and we go through a very intensive process of freeing those neuropeptides in a responsible, professional, and in a healthy way. It's all supervised. It's done really, really well. So that information on my website, Gregg Braden, GreggBraden.com. Go to the events section. We have one event coming up in March of this year and then one in September. March is in the high desert of New Mexico on native land. And
Mhm.
the one in the fall is in Niagara Falls on the United States side of Niagara Falls and the Canadian border, is where that will
All
be.
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Greg. Greg, it's really an honor that you are here. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, really.
And thank you as well. Have a beautiful rest of this day. And I want to say, everybody watching, we love you all. Take good care. Thank you.